What's up, everybody? Cinephile Mike here. Today, I am joined by Kevin McLaughlin, the director, producer, and editor of Riot, From Rebellion to Redemption, a documentary that revisits the 1967 Newark uprising and traces its long shadows across generations. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited that this film is finally getting out to the world after way too long in production.
Yeah. So, diving in, this film is deeply tied to your own history, growing up in Newark and your father's role as a firefighter. When did this move from something personal to something that you felt needed to be shared publicly?
Well, like you were saying before we got into the show here, you were a New Yorker who didn't never heard about this, and that was the case for so many people. And I felt like it was an important story that needed to be told. It was such a massive thing in my community that a lot of people even referred to it as like the difference, before the riots and after the riots with BC and AD. Everything was different, and life really changed a lot. In fact, the original title I was using on this film was "The Week That Changed the World."
Mm.
But people who were not from Newark didn't understand that. I had to change it.
And so, talking about the title, the film, it frames the story as moving from rebellion to redemption. So, how early did that arc come into focus for you, and how did it guide what you included or what you left out of the film?
Well, I had enough material to make at least three movies.
Mhm.
And there's just an incredible number of great stories that were left on the cutting room floor. But the more I spoke to people, the more I saw how there was an evolution. And it took a while in historic terms, not in the terms of making the film, but in the history of Newark. I think there was a very long period after 67 where there was really almost no hope at all. People were just broken. And it wasn't probably until maybe the late 80s, maybe even the 90s, when things started coming back. And now there's a lot of life there.
So, as a filmmaker, I'm curious, how did you balance? Because you were so close to this story emotionally and the familial connections. How did you balance, being that close and still, keeping your distance to be fair and expansive of this whole story?
Well, I think I'm pretty open-minded. I try to take all perspectives. That was one of the first things I realized when I started doing this and talking to people was that if you ask 10 people the same question, you get 10 different answers.
Mhm.
And they were largely divided into two groups. The white people say one thing and the black people say another. So I thought the best way to tell the story was to let all of them have their say and let the viewer decide where the truth lies in the middle of that.
And so talking about that, when the different perspectives, you bring together, so you interview first responders, you interview activists, you interviewed residents. As you were going, were there any particular perspectives that surprised you the most once you started conducting all of these interviews?
That's a tough question. I guess I was surprised mainly by the wording, the word I got from the National Guard. I think I only no, I interviewed a couple of National Guardsmen. They were the ones who were kind of in it and yet not from it. They were the at that time the local National Guard unit was on a training mission in Ohio or someplace,
Right.
and so the people who were brought in were from South Jersey. So they were kind of foreigners. They might as well have been from Mars. They had no knowledge of Newark or of urban life at all. One of the firemen said, they wouldn't have known a black guy if you drew him a picture. So
Mhm.
they were kind of way out of their element, and that was, I think, part of the reason that they were so freaked out and so trigger happy.
Wow. And so building the documentary, and you said it's been, cooking for so long, and, so it's been updated to reflect events from 2020 and beyond. How did revisiting, all this material all these years later change your understanding of what happened back in 1967?
Well, I'm more the more time goes by, the more I realize that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Mhm.
Sadly, we have the same, very similar kinds of things happening today because people haven't learned how to get along, and the government still doesn't always respect the viewpoint of the little people. And that's the sad part of it. But hopefully, seeing this, get some people to think twice before they let things get out of control. I've been thinking about this in the terms of, like in Minneapolis now, a lot of the leaders are saying, please keep it peaceful, please keep it
Mhm.
peaceful. There are some people maybe who don't want to keep it peaceful, but there's no such thing as an invite only protest. You can have people come and have the best intentions of making your voice heard and having a peaceful protest. It only takes one guy to throw a brick, and suddenly it's a riot.
Mhm. Well, and it was interesting because in the film, they talked about, was it a riot, was it an attack, and the understanding of these terms and right the definitions that people have for them. So I appreciated that one of the things you do in this film is that you have those different perspectives and kind of clarify like what those terms are and trying to get some kind of solid through line.
Right. It's one of those things that's a controversy that I think shouldn't be. There are people who are offended by the term riot, and this is discussed in the film.
Mhm.
They think that it uh, disrespects the root of the protest, or doesn't honor the legitimacy of the protest at the root of it. But I disagree with that. I think that it could be the best of intentions at the start, and even if 99% of the people are going to be peaceful, it's that other group that turns it into a riot. I've never once heard a newscaster say there was a rebellion today in such and such
Right.
city. It's something that people come up with after the fact.
Right. And with a subject as complex as this and so emotionally charged, I want to talk to you a little bit about when you were editing the piece together. So once you've collected all this, as you were going for you, what did it mean that you were getting the message right as you were going through the edit?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, there's a million ways that this could have been done, and actually, being that it's been in production so long, there are probably 25 versions on my computer. Uh, some of them I don't even remember. But I'm an editor by trade. I've been doing it all my life, practically all my adult life. So it kind of comes second nature to me, and I'm not afraid to chop out that big part that I really liked, just because it doesn't quite fit in with the flow of the story. So I the reviews are saying that I did well with that, so I'm pleased about that. And the thing I'm most proud of, I think, is that people from all walks of life, regardless of their race or their socioeconomic status, by and large, say that it's a very fair and honest story.
Yeah. And a little bit about the way you pieced it together. So you blend your talking head interviews, the archival footage, the pictures, and then you also had these fascinating illustrated images that would pop up as we were going through this story chronologically. How did you work with your team to decide what parts of this story were going to be illustrated and what was going to just be told in the story?
Well, really, there was no team; it was just me.
Okay.
So the decision was based on what I had visuals for. So some people told me fantastic stories that I want to include, but I couldn't really just have a talking head go through all of that, because in most cases it takes them 10 minutes to tell the story, and you only have 1 minute on screen. So you have to cut it up and cover it with something visual. And if I had had more money, I would have done reenactments of all those incidents. That would have cost a fortune. I couldn't do that. And I came up with the idea of like a court reporter sort of a drawing, and went out on the hunt for the right artist to do that. It started out with my stick figures. If you ever see those, you'd be laughing the rest of the day. But the guy I connected with, Gary Giacomora, happens to be a retired New York City policeman. So he was very familiar with what a lot of these things should look like as far as police cars and guns and so forth. So he was really the ideal person for that. Plus, he had been retired and he had plenty of time to work on it.
I'll say as I was watching it, I'm like, and I'm a huge comic book nerd, so I'm almost like I feel like there could be a companion graphic novel to go along with this documentary, which as a teacher, I would love to see as a tool in like US history classes. That's my other soapbox.
I do hope to have a big life for this film in the education world. I'm actually putting together a version that comes in 3 chapters so that it can be shown in the span of a normal class, one chapter at a time. But
Nice.
a few people have seen it, said they thought it should be required viewing in high schools.
Hmm.
And I agree, because it's something that I think is an important lesson that very few people are learning.
And speaking of education, this is one of my educational moments I love to do when I talk with filmmakers, and especially reflecting on the process, because, like you said, there's probably 25 different versions of this film on your computer and all the years you spent. What would you say has been your greatest best practice or something you learned working on this project that you would like to take with you into your next project? And what would you say was your greatest learning curve or challenge that you're going to try to bypass next time?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for the most documentary filmmakers, most filmmakers in general, is just finding the way to fund it. And when you're in this case was really like a one man operation. So just finding the fortitude to keep going when it looks like it's going nowhere. I mean, I had numerous people tell me, "Why don't you just hang it up at this point?" And others, I put out this newsletter on a semi-regular basis over the years, and I would say, it's coming." And there were some people actually wrote back and said, "I'll believe it when I see it." Well, now they can see it. So
Yep.
I'm glad that I stuck with it. There were many times I confess I thought about throwing it out because it was just draining. So my advice to anybody else is just keep at it.
Nice. And you talked a little bit about how one thing you're hoping that people take is, that idea to rethink these ideas when they see the film. Is there anything else that you're just hoping after they spend time viewing this story that they walk out with besides the understanding of these ideas?
Well, I think the lesson is to talk, hear what the other side is saying. I think that all of these conflicts are rooted in people not talking to each other, not thinking about the other person's point of view and what their life is like. So that's what leads to most of these things. And the idea that this film shows all those point of views hopefully makes people think, oh yeah, I see now why I should speak to somebody rather than throw a rock at them.
Words to live by. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. So, for everyone out there, keep an eye out. Riot from Rebellion to Redemption streams on the PBS app starting February 1st, and it will be premiering on the World Channel on February 12th. Kevin, again, thank you so much and best of luck with the project.
Thank you so much for having me.